the vagaries of load shedding and settled into the space. So let me take this time to welcome everyone both online. I think I need to say it's a timely conversation between Professor Mbembe and Dr. Mbuyiseni on apartheid after South Africa. However, I say it anyway for the record. My name is Victoria J. Collis-Kutelezi, and I'm your moderator for this evening's conversation. I want to first thank WISA for hosting it. I think it is critical that we have spaces that are spaces that critique and critical.
I think we are on already.
And WISA continues to be that. I also want to thank Mbuyiseni for having this conversation. I will begin with brief bios for both speakers and a short, loose framing of today's conversation. I'll then hand over to Dr. Ndlozi to speak. Professor Mbembe will speak thereafter. We'll move to a moderated conversation between Achille and Mbuyiseni, and then open for questions from the audience. We will, apologies to those streaming online, only be taking questions in the room, but please stay, text, message your friends and colleagues who are in the room if you have questions that you'd like to put forward. So I don't really need to introduce you to either speaker, but then Professor Achille Mbembe is a Cameroonian African historian and political theorist. Is research professor at the Wits Institute for Social and Economic Research, WISA, at the University of the Witwatersrand. He's also General Director of the Innovation Foundation for Democracy in Africa. Well known for his scholarship on colonialism, post-coloniality, Fanon, and much more. Dr. Mbuyiseni is a South African politician, political activist, and public intellectual. From 2024 to January of this year, when he resigned, he was a member of the National Assembly as a member of the Economic Freedom Fighters. He served as EFF's first official spokesperson until 2020, and he will start his weekday show on Power FM, I believe, next. This discussion comes at a critical moment in South Africa post-1994, at a critical moment globally, and critically in terms of South Africa in the world, and the legacies of apartheid South Africa geopolitically and conceptually. This moment announces a crisis, as it were, of the post-World War II global order, as well as the post-1990 Accords. This period, from World War II to 1990, temporally marked the start and end of juridical formal apartheid in South Africa.
Hello?
The mic is off.
Now it's on.
Now it's on? Okay. So, take it back. The moment announces a crisis. It's off again. Just shout. Okay. Can you hear me at the back? Some at the back can hear me and some
don't. Just increase the volume on the mic. Always.
No, this one is also not registering. It will not be televised. Can you hear me now if I stand here? Is this fine? Okay. So this moment announces a crisis of the post-World War II global order as well as the post-1990 Accords. It temporally marks or World War II, the end of World War II temporarily marked the start of apartheid, and 1990 or 1994, the post-1990, marked the end of formal juridical apartheid. We can, of course, continue, and I think that's what we're going to do, talk about the perpetuation and continuation of apartheid. At the same time, post-World War II and 1990 marked bookends for the period of formal decolonization across large parts of the globe, or what we might call flag independence. They mark two certain enchantments and superchargings of capitalism, consumption, neoliberalism, and newer or modified modes of extraction. So what does this mean for South Africa in material and conceptual terms? What and how does South Africa signify in this moment? How do we think about imperialism and capital from the African continent, both in and beyond, outside of South Africa, as well as South Africa's role on the continent in terms of capital and imperialism? These are but some of what our speakers will engage on this evening. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Mbuyiseni to share his opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening or afternoon to all. This facility says your card is full. They said I must press it when I arrive here, but thanks very much. It's very intimidating to be back here at WISA and to be in conversation with Professor Mbembe, who is my teacher. For about 15 years, I've avoided a conversation with him. It was first initiated by Kelly some couple of years ago, and I said, no, I want to be on the other side when he speaks. And then we, sometime last year, concretely had to deal with his new book, Brutalism, and again, the political higi-haga that I went through, I avoided to bring that to the discussion of brutalism. I'm hoping that some of the cloud has cleared and you will not force me back tonight into a conversation about my political demise. I'm still very young, so it certainly is not the end of that particular gene. Professor Mbembe has cheated me today. He's cheating because he invited, or we agreed on a conversation. Nobody brings a prepared speech to a conversation. I think at least we have to somehow be committed to that particular rule. And then he made the most dangerous excuse for why he's got a prepared sheet. He made the most dangerous excuse. He said he's going very old. I think it's an unfair. So I started to think, okay, let me put my own thoughts and in a sort of opening of the conversation about apartheid after South Africa. And as I said, I avoided completely to write a prepared intervention. Indeed, our conversation is happening precisely in this world described by our facilitator. I think that we are at the cutting edge of a new reorganization of imperialist forces, of imperialism as a movement of expansion for expansion's sake. There are now much more serious possibilities, I think, not only of a settlement into some other galactic planetary existence, but also of a super intelligent reality, more intelligent than human beings. This is important because artificial intelligence, we may have thought that there are aliens from elsewhere. You remember in the 60s, soon after the whole moon landing, then were serious conversations about what if there is an actual alien existence more intelligent than the West, often not more intelligent than us Africans. And I recall that Carl Jung's response, which I think we must think about today with the threat of artificial intelligence. You will hear that intellectuals in the West are responding in a sort of similar way. He was like, if there is some alien invasion of super intelligent, super civilized, better than us, that comes to colonize planet Earth, we Europeans have never had such a thing. We must use the atomic bombs to basically destroy the world, because we cannot submit ourselves to a superior intelligence. So civilization, and that's the center of the claim of civilization, is intelligence. The human mastery over nature and history, the human mastery over the future, the human mastery is at the center of the organizing, or was at the center of the organizing of the movement we call colonization. And I want to then enter the conversation through Hannah Arendt. Hannah Arendt is one of, I think, important Western voices and philosophers and thinkers. Of course, all of them are common when it comes to thinking about race. And the entire European intelligentsia that went to the United States in the post-war World War II, or towards its end from Europe, all of them, when it came to the civil rights movement, we all know it was like the end of reason. And for that reason, I think, of course, Hannah Arendt forms very much part of that group. But in the origins of totalitarianism, I think she does something interesting on the chapter about South Africa. Because she's tracing, as it were, in different forms, maybe three large global movements or global realities: imperialism, anti-Semitism, and what were then called totalitarian states, but in essence, Soviet Russia. And in the discussion of imperialism, that's where she locates South Africa. I finished my entire schooling without ever coming across Hannah Arendt here at Wits. I'll be very sure that she's not a very common name in South African domestic thinking about the problems, not just of this country, the world. I think generally there's very little interaction anyway with continental philosophers. Maybe that's why Mbembe's work itself is not quite a standard edition in most curriculums. Too much analytical philosophy in South Africa, except in Africana universities, in religious studies or theology, very limited as well, interaction with continental philosophers. But there are two things that I find important I'd like to put on the table, maybe more there, is her location of a people that came to call themselves, and quite frankly, even in Guillaume's, or is it Guillaume's terms, a sort of confiscated identity, the Afrikaners. Because the first people that we called Afrikaners were natives, slaves, and colors. But at some point in the 1700s, to distinguish themselves from Uitlanders, from other white Europeans, and to try basically to designate an identity that they are whites, natives of the African continent. So Hannah Arendt does something very interesting, which I don't think we interact with a lot, which I think explains the brand of racism that found expression in South Africa. It's a very unique brand because what she does there is to demonstrate that for about a century or so, these descendants of Hollanders or the Dutch degenerated. So degenerated culturally, spiritually, that they became indistinguishable to the other Bantu people in the south. That the only difference was the color of their skin.
That's her argument.
And this is very important in the identity of the Afrikaners. That within Western civilization, there were actually a degeneration. They were so lost in terms of Western civilization, Western sentiment, Western mannerisms. She actually says very dramatic things about them. And I think all of us should revisit that chapter. That these people were literally an embarrassment to people who colonize countries. They had achieved nothing. They were busy with nothing. And their organization of themselves was based on contempt to work.
That's what she says, yeah.
They had no literature. They had no science. They had no inventions. The things that were central to the identification of Europeans in other parts of the world in the great march of a civilizing mission. But they were also so useless to Europe itself. They were cut off. And until she argues, and this is important, I think, just to conclude that part, apartheid is therefore the coming in together of this racial identity, which was like basically the superiority, their superiority was based on nothing, was not based on a civilization. Their claim to superiority was basically that they looked white. And including the Great Trek, they kept running away, trekking, as it were, from any settlement, of developing a place, developing a landscape, turning it, subjecting it, as it were, to the different projects of human mastery. They were not the master race. Hence their distortion of Christianity. Although the Christian premise itself betrayed the fact that they could be a chosen people, and it didn't help when the Jewish community increased, particularly around the industrial projects of Kimberley and the Witwatersrand. And their contempt as well for the Jews was the basic disorganization of them as a chosen people. Now, so basically, Afrikaner identity is an identity of this, in brackets, white trash, that the entire Western civilization couldn't really relate with. Africa, apartheid, is therefore a technology of civilizing, of uplifting them culturally to the levels of Western identity after having been abandoned. Now that's not original to me, that's Hannah Arendt. And she locates this because she says that that brand of racism is actually, as a tool of imperialist rule, originates in South Africa. And the second tool that was important to imperialist domination was bureaucracy. And apartheid, was a powerful. So at the core of apartheid, it's not quite the native question where the native is African natives. It's actually the native question in as far as saving what had become native out of Afrikaners. So it was a technology, as it were, a bureaucratic technology to which secret societies were at the center, not just the secret societies that were central to the expansionist project of Cecil John Rose, but also themselves, Afrikaners, ran apartheid through a bureaucratic secret community. And their relationship to capitalist production, it betrayed that logic. Apartheid was not always a rational project to capitalist profit extraction. Now, that's in a sense, apartheid is always, in my view, in that sense, it is not something that is married to a place called South Africa, neither is something that a democratic system can truly subdue. To the extent to which a white identity anywhere in the world is bastardized, it will require the racial ideological tools and bureaucratic technologies to distinguish that white society in the name of a global master race. Of course, I think that because I'm with Professor Mbembe, I suspect that there are certain provocations I can make. He's an elder. And there's something otherwise curious, because this is a minority, they remain a minority. But somehow they've managed to survive for 400 years with the insistence of that they are different because they are white. Nothing else, no other claim. There's no, even when Afrikaner nationalism becomes a project in the 1920s, it's not really a claim to some past civilization. It's not really a claim to some past literary movement, or the cultural, like sort of the British would do, the Greeks would do, and so on and so forth, because it is a stolen identity. It's a stolen identity. They are not Africans, because they've got in their eyes, the Bantus are not quite human. So, and this is where I think I want to sort of push the idea a little bit. The curious, or rather the tragic part is apartheid as well, it's for a white settler community. That's why it doesn't really arise in other parts of the continent. It's about these people who think they have nowhere else to go. Otherwise, after the abandonment of the trade stations, or after the abandonment of a plantation, white people normally just went back to Europe. So there's this problem here of the native question of a people that had become sort of niggerized. But these people existed within a large native black population. And it is here that I think the curious or tragic question of tonight must also travel. And Fanon puts it in much more radical terms. Fanon says, don't tell me about black people or the black man. He has bought to the superiority of the white man a long time ago. Exactly on what grounds did Afrikaner people in that 120, 150 years, precisely on what grounds did they manage to exist as a superior people? Precisely on what grounds today do we still make an apology towards radical equality? Precisely on what grounds? And that's my question. What about black people that constantly makes you, or makes us, buy into whites as gods? There's some lightness, before the missionaries, before Christianity, just that these people look white, we enter into different forms of subservience. We fight because they're taking something. Otherwise, there is this buying into the fact that somehow they are above. And it robs the world. It robs the world. It robs black people in general of radical equality. I'm interested in that question. My final one is to go back to artificial intelligence. So the response, if you check the conversations in the West today, they are scared of artificial intelligence for a basic reason. If machine learning and maybe ultimately robots that look like us dominate us, history, they say, as we know it today, as human history will end, because history is based on the idea of human mastery. So when the robots take over, and the robots might not start the Matrix war or the Terminator, they might really just manipulate us into believing they should govern over our affairs. And this is the fear that dominates in the West, is that we have somehow through technological advancement arrived at the possibility of an existing intelligence, not from space, but from here, that might finally be more masterful in ways that ourselves may, because we are such victims as humanity in general, of submitting to an intelligence superior. Because they are intelligent, they will know how to rule us. That's the basic thesis. But of course, racial organization or human selection is already embedded in the intelligence that is being built in machines, in the Internet of Things. So I saw that somebody did ask AI to take the Avengers Endgame and asked it to set it up with the actors in the 1980s. Do you know what AI did? This is AI. It replaced every white actor with a white actor, every woman with a woman, and every black person with a black person. Why should Captain America in the head of AI be a white man? I think I'm speaking back to myself, I don't know. Maybe AI is responding. So because artificial intelligence is developed in the hands of a people who believe in their eternal mastery over the rest of us who are not human, and we are always very much scary to them. And that's another important thing about apartheid. It is a constant defense that they must not be like us. The scary thing that what these people are not quite animal, they are not quite human, they act, they move like us, but we must never be them. Apartheid ideologically is a defense against the advancement of equality on those grounds and the constant privileging of white supremacy. Artificial intelligence is embedded in that cultural premise. So what is it going to do to blacks once it decides? Of course, there are other dangers, and those will be my opening. I want to make sure I have exhausted this Afrikaans question. Those will be my opening remarks, and thank you very much.
I would like to thank WISER and the director, Ronipa, and Victoria, who is helping us to steer this conversation tonight. I really don't need to thank Mbuyiseni. It goes without saying that I am personally extremely delighted to have him back. We all know where he has been recently. Some of us tried to accompany him throughout that journey. But we are absolutely delighted to be there at a moment when a new chapter of his life is about to unfold. He's a young person. He still has a long road ahead of him, and we have no doubt that he will walk along that road with the same intelligence and clarity of the mind you have seen a moment ago. Mbuyiseni said that he is a student of mine, and I have been trying to ask him to stop saying that for some time, but he's not listening to me. But I'm absolutely serious when I say that he's not my student. I am his student. I have learned a lot from Mbuyiseni. And every time we have had the opportunity to sit down, I have had to hold him and ask him to please not go, to keep talking. So tonight I feel like telling him, know what, I really don't have much to say. Why don't you go then, keep talking? And he talks so well. He really talks very, very well.
Very true.
Yes. He's clear, he's fast, he thinks fast. He thinks about the ultimate consequences of the ideas he's putting on the table. I personally, I have been reading Hannah Arendt for some time. I have never in my entire life as a scholar heard anybody commenting on Hannah Arendt's chapter, Race and Bureaucracy, the way he did it tonight. And it is an invitation to all of us to go back to that work and to that chapter. He pushed her, Hannah Arendt, to her ultimate consequences, to places Hannah Arendt never really envisaged, or if she did, never really wanted to go. When she moved from Germany to the United States of America, as Mbuyiseni was saying, this amazing mind became totally unreasonable when faced with what Fanon called the fact of blackness. And in fact, Western thought, from its origin up to maybe now, who knows, has always basically abdicated when it came to think critically about the fact of blackness. And she doesn't escape to that unfortunate predicament. And all Mbuyiseni said about her description of the Afrikaners is absolutely true. It's pretty astonishing, one has to say. In fact, most of her sources, she has a key source, a key informant, if you want, in that chapter. It's a liberal historian called Cornelius de Kivit. De Kivit is her key informant when it comes to the analysis of this brand of racism which developed here in the southern tip of the continent. The other key informant is Conrad. Conrad's text, The Heart of Darkness. So she's putting together in a kind of dramatic dialogue the resources of the imagination and the brute facts of historiography in order to produce a text which is still, as we saw with Mbuyiseni's presentation, which is still requiring a supplement of interpretation, especially now. Now meaning what? Now meaning a time when a people who believed to be a master race, a superior race, and that people is now trying to reintroduce itself to the world as victimized. Victimized by whom? By those whose humanity we are not sure it does exist. So what we're seeing here, in fact, in this post-Arendtian moment, is a formerly superior master race, see, crying now, going all over the world, trying to mobilize those who are powerful, albeit unscrupulous, trying to mobilize them and call for them to come and help, because apparently this formerly master race is in danger. It is in danger of what? Of, if we are to believe what is being peddled, of a genocide. It is in danger of extermination. So that irony itself, I think, is in need of further, let's say, examination. It is in need of further examination, especially in light of a number of key questions Mbuyiseni put on the table. One of which, if I understood him well, has to do with a paradox, at least in my eyes. Paradox which has to do with the what clearly is an ongoing crisis of intelligence, or in any case, an ongoing crisis of certain form of intelligence, which is afflicting our times. In the sense that part of what we are witnessing is a vertiginous decline of reason. We have entered an epoch of profound intolerance of reason and rising nihilism in the world. This is happening, and Mbuyiseni gestured towards that, at a time when we are witnessing major transformations. They are underway. Transformations, the nature of which we are struggling to grasp. And every day, many of us, we wake up with the feeling that lived experience is increasingly artificially created, and reality is somewhat about to, or has already surpassed the vocabulary, the concepts we have available at hand to map it and to steer it. So we have this tremendous gap in the mind, where what we live, our experience, we don't have the tools to grasp it, to name it, let alone to steer it. And the fact is that, indeed, many concepts we inherited from past traditions, they seem to fail us today. And the fact that they fail us does not really help very much. And they fail us partly because they do not give shape to ideas that might help us to cohere positions of agency and positions of possibility. That's how I understood part of what you were sharing with us, Mbuyiseni. And I have to tell you that I'm not reading. I'm trying to think with you. I have some notes here, but I'm not reading them. So I'm not cheating. So that's the first thing. I would like to add 2 or 3 quick additional things to what Mbuyiseni told us in his attempt at mapping our present. I would like to add another fact that spoke about the crisis of certain forms of intelligence at a time when we are told that we are about to reach the highest stage of intelligence. You spoke a lot about this paradox. Why is it that intelligence is in crisis? Certain forms of it are in crisis at that very moment when we are almost on the cusp of reaching the highest stage of intelligence, that stage of intelligence which will open up our advent into the post-human. Let's just call it like that. So that's the first issue. The second, Mbuyiseni gestures toward that, is, it seems to me, the our advent into a new condition, which I would just call condition of planetarity, the planetary. The growing consciousness that the earth, which is the only place where human life is attested, that the earth is undergoing severe bio, geo, chemical, and human-induced mutations. The earth itself. That in fact, we are maybe not migrating towards other planets, but we are witnessing the emergence of an entirely new Earth. In any case, an Earth that is not exactly what it has been over millions of years. That we are seeing that. We are right at that moment. And some of these mutations are so epochal that they raise, in fact, or precisely because they raise the question of the Earth's habitability, the question of habitability, the question of whether or not we will be able to experience life on this planet, the only one where life for so long has been possible. So this question of habitability, it seems to me, is the other name of a number of issues Mbuyiseni was putting onto. In any case, that's how I read it. And then, of course, he asked us to pay attention to what he called artificial intelligence, which is in fact one of the key conditions of planetarity right now. The technostructure of computation we now inhabit I use the term technologies of computation. I could have used artificial intelligence like Mbuyiseni or synthetic intelligence. Let me just use technologies of computation in order to avoid, and Mbuyiseni studiously avoided that, the kind of traditional problem-solving approaches we tend to use when we speak in the language of the so-called knowledge economy or the fourth industrial revolution. You listen to our discourse in South Africa, that's what we speak about. Speak about the fourth industrial revolution and so forth and so on. Neither him nor I are using that language here because we want to go to the heart of the phenomenon. And the heart of the phenomenon is what he called artificial intelligence. It's what I'm trying to call technologies of computation. What do I mean by that? And Mbuyiseni mentioned it. I mean by that the fact that humanity, not Africans, not Europe, humanity at large, is now inescapably embedded in a vast complex system of sensors, of satellites, fiber optic cables, linking continents, data centers, communication protocols, etc., etc. This is, if you want, the ground we now inhabit. And the glass rectangles which have become part of us, the cell phone, the computer, etc., etc., etc. All of which, of course, is a deep, radical event because, in fact, it opens the door to entirely new ways of understanding ourselves, the world we live in, the other, and so forth and so on. So it does that. But it also opens up an entirely new epoch during which our reading of who we are, where we are located, our relationship with the others, all of that is up for grabs. And it seems to me that, of course, this is a matter that calls for a lot of our attention. Now, let me say two quick things about the current political moment worldwide. I believe that, in line with what the kind of reflection Mbuyiseni was opening up, I believe that the big battle in the coming years is about the reshaping of the relations between capital, the state, and communities. He mentioned capital, the state too. We have to add to that communities. It is a battle about the balance of power between government and big tech. Big tech, especially in shaping things like the future of payments, the control of related data, that whole world of algorithms. That is the big battle in front of us. We just need, for instance, to look at the current drive in investments in cryptocurrencies, the development of digital currencies, to realize at what point this is a very serious matter. In the sense that large corporations monopolize knowledge and data, centralize, of course, the algorithmic means of coordinating human activities, and all the while weakening public institutions, making it impossible for public institutions to organize society and appropriating that task for themselves. So that is part of the one of the reasons why, indeed, it seems to me that this will be a key field of battle as we move along. We already see it in places such as the United States of America. What we see in old democracies are tech billionaires, of course, helping to underwrite a winning presidential campaign in ways which would have been illegal not so long ago. What we see is a top campaign donor basically rampaging through the federal government, shutting down agencies, firing workers, seemingly without any regard for his own conflicts of interest, in the sense that his private employees can access sensitive government computer systems, including the Treasury Department's payment processing systems, through which, of course, trillions of dollars in taxpayers' funds flow each year. That is what we are seeing. So what we are seeing is the reality of concentrated private interests capturing the political system, the corrupting influence of big money over government, in a context in which there are now fewer restraints than ever before on the ability of these institutions, for instance, to impose to presidential power some sense of measure and equilibrium. So the collapse of these legal safeguards designed to curb the outsized influence of money in democracy is hollowing out democracy. And we have to deal with that. I'll end with one or two big signals to the ways in which all of this reverberates in our own continent. And I have here in mind particularly what's going on in the Congo. Because, and I'll end with where Mbuyiseni started. You see, I told you that in that chapter, Race and Bureaucracy, Arendt refers to South Africa. But for some reason, in fact, in that work of political philosophy, which came out during those years, whenever South Africa is mentioned, the Congo is never that far.
Yes.
The Congo is always like the shadow of South Africa. In fact, it's not something I have thought about. I'm thinking about it aloud now. South Africa, the Congo has always been somewhat the response to the South African question. And we all know what's going on right now in the Congo, where South Africa is also implicated. We have soldiers who were killed there. Others are trapped there. They haven't been brought back yet. There's a lot of South Africa in the Congo, and a lot of the Congo in South Africa. So it seems to me that as we reflect on and we try to decipher our present and imagine potential avenues for a future that would be different from what Arendt is describing, a future where there wouldn't be any place for any master race, a future where extermination is no longer possible. As we try to imagine all of that, we have to keep tightly in our both hearts and our minds that twin reality of South Africa and the Congo. So I'll stop there and we'll have a conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbuyiseni and Ashil. I want to, so now I'm going to not throw out my paper, but I'm going to throw it out a bit because we've gone in different directions. So forgive me.
Is it possible to see the people?
We can't see them.
Can the people see us?
It's done.
The people can see that you can't see us.
But I'm imagining at the back, are you struggling?
Oh,
Can you see us?
Yeah.
But you can hear us. Okay. We'll go with that. While I want to come back to this question of the future and possibilities, and ultimately what we're talking about as liberation, right? How we get to that place. I want to come back to some points in both your presentations around the sort of where we are. So this question of technology and our contemporary and how technology is reshaping our politics, how technology is reshaping the relationship between collectives and the state, individuals and the state, and big corporations. Can we speak to how central racialization is to that phenomenon in that? And of course you can disagree, you can go in different directions. But it strikes me that part of what's happening as a kind of, the US as example, but the US as model, and also the US as a kind of one node of a mobilizing reorganization of minoritized whiteness globally, right? So Afrikaners find audience in the US because there's something that is connected there, and there's audience in parts of Europe, there's audience further south in Australia. There is a kind of reorganization of minority versus majority globally. We're moving into a world into which the majority of the world is not numerically white. Yet part of what is happening there does not seem to me to be dissimilar to the partnership that is made between white capital and, to use your terms, white trash or poor whites, right? That deal that's made in the 19th century that has kind of stayed. In a way, what is happening through Mask is that this is where what is being done does not only affect Black people in the US, but Black people become the alibi, right? The quote unquote outsized place of Black people within the US, right? Inappropriate access to resources becomes the alibi. The removal of diversity, equity, and inclusion becomes a kind of alibi. And so I'm wondering how we can think about this reorganization in terms of what you referred to as the uptake of racial intelligence by artificial intelligence. So who is actually mastering this might be a limited few billionaires, limited few corporations, but there is a new kind of wager that's happening between a very small minority of white capital and a mass majority in terms of whiteness of poor whites who actually will never benefit from that, but it's a new kind of reorganization of that relationship, or is it?
Am I in? Yeah. Thanks, Prof. I think I did want to start with Hannah because of the question of intelligence and this form of intelligence that is threatened. It is in my view precisely the intelligence of master class or master race. That's the intelligence that is at stake vis-a-vis the machines or computation. Because if you think about the defense of what might remain, what might be a response to the machine takeover, meaning the making of the West finally into the Afrikaners, like the coming of Europe under a superior intelligence that they have no idea how to control. Since their humanity centers around this question of intelligence, if you think about the responses, is that what might continue making us or making them intelligent are the primitive instincts that they were dismissing as not part of their civilization identity. So, figures of speech, machines won't be able to lie in the Kantian sense. Love, basic instincts generally. That is the sort of organizing defense against what might remain human vis-a-vis a superior intelligence. Because these machines are becoming autonomous, they can self-generate, they can self-supervise. So I think that's the parallel I sort of wanted to draw. And the ideology of apartheid has a sort of importance in that sense that ultimately the only difference may as well in front of this superior intelligence may be nothing else but the fact that they are white and we are black. Just the fact of, they are talking about 5 years. I listened to a recent economist debate hosted by The Economist. They're speaking about 5 to 10 years of the applications and the speed with which machines or artificial intelligence itself is coming into self-reliance, into getting out of human control, getting out of human, and they are calling for regulation. You could regulate the atomic bomb because the atomic bomb could not produce another atomic bomb, could not do a self-deployment of itself. So the artificial intelligence is really these machines, these programs. Even Elon Musk is not safe. It's not safe once his machines really take over. Even going to Mars with those machines doesn't guarantee his sort of mastery. And it is apartheid, or the concept of apartheid, that is useful to think about this plateau, this opening world. The risks that it carries is that at the end, I think I will provoke Prof's work here on necropolitics is that we will always be the population that is prepared to be attributed all risks first. This brings me to the DRC. The DRC is central because the minerals of the self-generating machines lie there. It is in the interest of imperialist capital that that part of the world never really finds autonomous organization. The chaos, particularly, remember the question of the Banyamulenga is the sort of native question, what we in South Africa call the national question. So, because Mabutu Siseko expels them, there's this constant rejection of the Banyamulenga as not part of the Congo people. Like if we wake up from time to time and say all the Swatis hack to Swaziland, or all the Basotho, plus you are busy here in the mines, let's close the border and expel all the Basotho from the Vaal. From the Vaal River to the mountain kingdom. The Banyamulenga are precisely that. It's a result of the wrong colonial borders that separated lovers, that separated families in the way we see in Palestine. And I guess I do have to say something, because South Africa needs to first admit its mining interest in the province of Kivu and how that compromises the peacekeeping initiative, since it doesn't happen under the banner of South Africa, but the African Union, SADC, and so on and so forth. It needs to first appreciate the conflict of interest, which is really fueling the sort of conflict with Rwanda. We need to first unmask that and stop making it about anything else. There are competing mining capitalist interests and other resources concentrated in that area of the DRC. And I think our country, to the extent possible, in as much as we don't abandon the concept of the Congo that must be in peace with itself, the Congo whose borders are respected by other African states, we may first have to say maybe someone else needs to do peacekeeping there, other than the countries whose companies are busy in the extractive industries there. And I first want to conclude my remarks at this stage with Prof's avoidance of the question of natives' relationship just generally with the white skin. I'm really worried about that. The seeming fear or the seeming discomfort today, when there's no reason taking the geopolitical organization of trade, the geopolitical organization of political systems. Why are you still panicking when white people want to leave? I don't know why. It's another great track. Every time Afrikaner people had a problem of becoming equal with the Bantus, they just tracked. Every time the British suggested, the missionaries suggested, no, drop the color bar, they just took off. And I think that I will be interested. I'll say something about what they call the PayPal mafia at a later stage. But it's interesting that American democracy, at the moment, the state and Trump's project is reorganizing around the tech giants that are led by confessed racists and fascists. So Palestine, and this is important, you could not do to anyone in the world from Europe what the Israelis are doing to Palestinians.
No.
That capacity of the West to can coexist with a genocidal project is common, is consistent. It's, Jan Smuts is part of the drafters of the Declaration of Human Rights internationally that founds the United Nations, comes back and is comfortable. And all the American founding fathers who say God has given everybody an inalienable right to be equal, they write all of that and they retreat to their slave plantations. That coexistence is in my view, the importance of the organizing concept of apartheid for what the world is doing or what is opening up in the world, is that with the adjustment of the imperialist to artificial intelligence, capitalist profiteering, the risks that will accompany that particular opening must be understood in the same way at any stage that the West could exist with brutality towards native populations. It could be comfortable with administrative genocide in India, in Egypt, and today in Gaza. So it's like, Trump even tells them, release the hostages as soon as possible before I get sworn in, or else you are going to be exterminated. Goes in and says, in fact, Gaza is not habitable. So no one should go back there. Egypt should see to finish with the surviving people. We're gonna turn Gaza, into a nice place in the same way they wanted to do with Cuba. At the heart of Cuba was this place that they can go and be proper people of leisure. And I think that is important. So the other for white intelligence has become the machine. So there's us as the other, the blacks, they are constant the other, the non-Europeans. Every time there is a problem, don't worry. This is the point of all theoretical understandings of the relationship that constituted transatlantic slavery, colonization, apartheid, and the global transportations of different brands of apartheid. The classic example of which is Israel, which is an apartheid genocidal state. But I think that at the center of white people are worried again about their extinction, Prof. They are worried again in relation to artificial intelligence. Africana, a genocidal lie in South Africa is very much intimate with the general white worry over its own mastery role in the world. I think that particular coincidence is what is of interest. Expel all the foreigners from America, but you can get a land somewhere for Africans and give them a land somewhere. By the way, they won't survive. They don't have a good history of being able to truly be superior, except just being white. In a white community, I don't know, because all the native populations that were here in the 1600s, the 2000s, the 1700s, the 1800s, could have made a cultural claim. They had a cultural claim over the sort of niggerized Afrikaner population for about a century. They could have claimed that the Botswana, Amaxhosa, they could have claimed that we're culturally superior. We've got poems, We've got all types of cultural advantage, including music and so on and so forth. For some reason, a white person doesn't have to achieve so much. They just enter the room with a white skin. The black brothers and sisters react spiritual deity. They react like unkulunkulu ngenile. They just react. It doesn't matter how smart, how hardworking you will be, even at Wits. You could go collect all the smart blacks. They can come here. They will never enjoy life as powerful, intelligent, hardworking academics. They will always earn less than the white, lazy professors who have been here contributing absolutely nothing to understanding society. Just by the mere fact of their whiteness. And I mean, that's really apartheid after South Africa.
Okay. Yeah, I'm ready. Okay, sorry guys, on the issue of Palestine and Gaza, since we all know it's in the air. Two things strike me as far as the latest cycle of devastation has been unfolding. The first is the extent of the decimation. The term decimation, I use it purposefully. The decimation of civilian populations. The decimation of civilian populations with machines. Machines that can very rapidly process massive amounts of data in order to generate thousands of potential targets for military strikes. You probably have heard about Project Lavender. What you have here is that you have tracking softwares which locate the targets generally in their homes, and of course the next stage is picking the munition with which to bomb them, and to bomb them in their own homes. And according to those who have been following this matter, in fact, a hefty percentage of the munitions with which these targets are bombed in their own homes, a hefty percentage are so-called dumb bombs, unintelligent bombs, which are known for one thing. They are known to cause more collateral damage, quote unquote, than guided bombs, intelligent bombs, most of which are more expensive, in fact, than dumb bombs. So you want to kill as many people as possible with dumb bombs, basically, because it would cost you too much money. If you were to try to kill them with intelligent bombs, which means these bombs that are somewhat, somewhere, able to distinguish between the real target and so-called collateral damage. So you have had a lot of that at a pace, at a rhythm, velocity, and level we have not seen before. Entirely new. And of course, this has resulted in something I call in a short text, which will come out soon, unhoming. Unhoming means destroying people's homes, basically. You have had in Gaza entire residential blocks which have been turned, of course, into mountains of rubble. I don't have the figures here, but there are tons, thousands of tons of rubble that will have to be, if you want, cleared for Gaza to become habitable again. Here we go again with the question of habitability. Because what we do have there now are these mountains of rubble, toxic of course, deep pits, people searching in the cement, using their hands, looking for signs of their family houses, thousands of people buried under the ruins of their homes. That is something absolutely new in the short history of humanity. So that is one thing that I think is pretty hallucinatory. Then there is the point Mbuyiseni was alluding to, the project of turning Gaza from what it was. It was what? It was an open-air prison. That's what Gaza has been all along. Turning it from an open-air prison, and today a place of hallucinatory devastation, a place of desolation, a place of unimaginable destruction. You can hardly imagine it. So turning all of this into, let's just call it a Riviera. He mentioned Cuba, but just use another metaphor, a Riviera. What does it mean, a Riviera? It means, strictly speaking, a fantasy. A fantasy of what? A fantasy of escape, a place of hedonism and excess. That's what a Riviera is. That's what they wanted to turn Cuba into during those years. So to turn Gaza into a Riviera, it is as if the original sin of the United States of America was brought full circle. You know what the original sin of the US was? As we know, the US was built on two kinds of graves. A big grave, a big cemetery in the ocean during the transplantation of slaves from Africa to the Americas, the Middle Passage, which has made of the Atlantic Ocean an amazing cemetery, more or less of the kind under different circumstances the Mediterranean is becoming. So that's the first sin, original sin. But even before that, you have an earlier sin in the sense that the US was built on the graves of indigenous Americans. The genocide, extermination. Sense that the lands of indigenous Americans were turned into casinos. Casinos being what? Other than, in fact, these eminent symbols of naked and brazen hypercapitalism. So that's the project we are hearing about as far as Gaza is concerned. And it means, of course, if this project is to be implemented, it will require the eviction or the expulsion of around 2.1 million people out to Egypt, out to Jordan, and the grotesque, because it is grotesque, you will agree with me, the grotesque real estate project built on the corpses and the ruins of expendable lives is ethnic cleansing of the highest order. In a place which has been, of course, destroyed mostly by US bombs. So that's what we are dealing with here. And this is, in fact, how colonial powers and empires behave throughout history.
Yeah.
This is how they did it. So what we are witnessing is somewhat, if not a repetition, in any case, a signal to this long history of apartheid, but apartheid writ large and understood, of course, well beyond the confines of South Africa as such. Mbuyiseni explained very well the importance of the Congo in the transformation of capitalism as we are witnessing it now through the exploitation of rare minerals. Congo is absolutely at the center of all of that, just as it was at the center of the balkanization of the continent in Berlin. The continent looks the way it looks like today because originally Western powers wanted to settle the question of the Congo. When I say wanted to settle the question of the Congo, it means they wanted to know to whom did the riches and the wealth of the Congo, to whom did it belong? And we are more or less facing the same kind of issue today with new forms of imperialism, which, as Mbuyiseni was saying, are transnational in nature, but also transregional. Because in the Congo, in the project of stripping the Congo from its assets, you have not only Western multinationals, you also have African countries. You have Uganda, the military in Uganda, Ugandan elites, soldiers, and all of that. Of course, you have Rwanda. You also have fractions of South African capital. But this is tiny compared to the big behemoths coming from Belgium, Germany. Everybody is involved in it. So that's what we are facing. And it seems to me, as Mbuyiseni was saying, that of course the combination of synthetic intelligence, artificial intelligence, the rule of algorithms, and these new regimes of extraction, their combination, of course, is at the origin of huge landscapes of devastation, which are just as similar as the bombs I was telling you about as far as Gaza is concerned. they are rendering not only the lives of millions of people unbearable, they are rendering the habitats uninhabitable. Just keep this in mind, I'll stop there. 1 million people killed during the genocide in Rwanda, 3 or 4 million in the eastern Congo since the end of the genocide. So the Congo Basin and the Great Lake region is as huge a graveyard in our contemporary history as, of course, the Atlantic and the Middle Passage I was referring to. That's what I call necropolitics.
Okay, I want to just check if we have questions in the room. Hand up, not up. Up. Okay, 1. Okay, we'll start here. I'll try to push to 3 rounds, but we might only do 2. 1. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I suppose central to the question of apartheid tonight is 2 forces, power and intelligence. I think we should agree that in order for us to deal with apartheid, let's talk about our country, South Africa, we should place power where power is. We've looked at how we've tried to wrestle power since 1994 to now. We have battled. That's why today we've got so many of us breaking up politically, Dr. Ndlozi, to try and contest for power. We did a research. I'm part of a civic organization, a new civic organization called Champions of Emancipation that advances and champions the interests of the masses in between elections. We've discovered that power is not in political governance, but in economic dominance. We must come out of this place tonight knowing that Ndlozi is not just moved out, it's the superpowers that move you to the place. I read somewhere, Ndlozi, that you said the civic space has been neglected. And I've been speaking to my people pre-elections last year. We were trying to register the organization. Social development, they found our civic constitution radical, they cancelled it, they gave us a template, we registered. So we registered after. I said, I need Mbuyiseni here because this is how, when I saw that, I said, really, that's where it is. Why I'm saying this? Because in order for us to reorganize ourselves as Africans, let's stop fighting for crumbs. Let's look at the question of what is power. Power is not in governance, politically, but in going into the economy, contest for equity. Let's come out of this place with a demand for 51% of the economy. When we get 51%, land comes automatically. Pharmaceutical comes economical. So that's the first point on the issue of power. Power is in economic dominance. On the issue of intelligence, on the issue of intelligence, I've got a book here, the system is in a book form, we just launched the book. There's a chapter on technology. We were never supposed to work to earn a living. We're supposed to invest to earn a living so that you can do what you like. Play golf, do everything. So we have got a chapter here that speaks to the labor space. They must stop crying that jobs are going. We must reorganize ourselves to invest and get equity so that our people can be free. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ndlozi. My question is twofold. It regards with the media, the impossibility or the possibility of you playing you being politically neutral within the media space. You know, I think I just want to know how your role, yeah. And how did the, I think I was aware that you were in a communication committee at the parliament. How did that experience, you know, assist you now that you're going to play a role in the media? Yeah, what is it that you have learned through that experience that has sharpened your knowledge on media? Yeah.
One more. and then-
Thank you very much, Dr. Ndlozi and Prof. Mbembe. It's actually good to hear someone born in the 80s to narrate such an illustrative lecture about what apartheid is. But I want to pose a question outside the political space, though. As intellectuals, what can we do and how can we move forward in addressing the matter of nationhood, particularly when it comes to racial classification, cultural identities, spiritual identities, as well as molding communities that are actually going to be part of the conversation of nation building? How do we then strip off this armor of the nation as inscribed by the apartheid regime? How do we rip off the powers of from these people that molded what nationhood is according to them? And also engaging on the fact that we are not subjects as we were according to them. We are now fully, fledged and woke Africans. So I'd like to pose that question to both of you. Thank you.
I'm handing over to you both, but can I piggyback on that with provocation about nation and the nation state and what you were both speaking about earlier in terms of the coloniality of our borders? If you can speak to that. Okay.
I don't know if we do. I propose maybe we stand this time, Prof. I know you're very old. I have a lot of love for Prof. Mbembe. When we start jumping on the tables in Parliament, we were embarrassing to some people in overalls, and then. But to him, he just got more excited, So, and that is important. Public discourse is important, and I think there is something about our South African public discourse that needs to accept how thin it has become. I think critical reason, critique has somehow, I don't know where it retreated to. There must never be an apology that to do public thinking must always be on the basis of a commitment to proper reading, to deploying very, very informed forms of public contribution. So I worry about wherever I think that we need to rigorously, consistently do more public displays of critical criticism until some forms of bastardized thinking retreats into embarrassment. We have given too much space. You don't silence a non-intelligent voice. You just have to consistently display. Otherwise, we will open up to a full takeover of scoundrels. I'm going to this question of neutrality in the media space. I'm not going to be a journalist. I'm not going to report news. I'm not going to write news. I'm going to facilitate a conversation on public radio. It's a talk show. I'm not a journalist. I will not be doing journalism. So what is media? It is very much broad. Today, no one can say they are not in the media because you have a Twitter account. You have a Facebook account. Sizwe, I think that's Sizwe. Yeah. Sizwe, if it's Sizwe, I think it's Sizwe. I couldn't go to his podcast, because, otherwise my message is my brother. But have you seen the explosion of podcasts? Is a refusal to this idea that the media is somewhere. This is journalists. Don't confuse them to the paradigm of the tools of public discourse. Television, the tools of the dissemination of mass media. And we shouldn't retreat because you have a political idea. You must bring it and it must be challenged. But I'm saying that if you realize how thin the public discourse in South Africa has become, we are fast making celebrities, we are fast celebrating and giving unlimited amount of public space to scoundrels. I think in as much as there's this threat by computation, we must nonetheless resist and consistently, wherever you are, demand the best argument that is informed, that is well read. If you don't know, keep quiet or ask a question. I think that's the challenge of radio. We're just coming to do that. There is no apology I make for leaving party politics. And I don't want to talk about that tonight. It's sufficiently clear that today we're at the university. And maybe in as much as one is trying to go back to the university, I'm wondering where has the university been all along. There is something very dramatic that artificial intelligence is threatening because it is also threatening the space of the university as public institutions. Because where the institutions that are generating all these knowledges of the future are no longer in the university, the university must not retreat. We need to push back and put critical questions about the opening reality. I think we were beginning to speak about the forms in which democracy has not been an adequate answer. Firstly, to the capitalist continuous profit for profit's sake, and how the pursuit of profit for profit's sake has often, particularly in the opening 21st century, just created massive populations of waste. Populations that are not exploitable. Like large armies they are not really reserve armies. They are armies that are not important. They are not integratable to capitalist exploitation anymore. That's the first, and that problem is very much alive here. The continuous rising of unemployment. And the participation into the democratic state, democracy and so on, has not empowered populations, has not resolved this question of economic inequality. Look, of course, 2013 we co-authored a manifesto to establish the EFF. At the center of it was that proposition of economic freedom in our lifetime. But I would not like you to think of economy as outside of the province of the nation state. Because it is the nation state which was a tool for the industrial upliftment and civilization of the Afrikaner people. That is how they came back into the levels of civilized and industrialized settler European community. Because these guys just postponed the budget. Go ask them how much is that budget that they controlled. Is over R1 trillion since 1994. They've presided over, leave the banks and the rest of what you call economy in their hands. They've been presiding over an over R1 trillion budget since 1994. Do they really still have an excuse today? Do they still really? Have you seen what people have been doing with the tool of the nation state in the 20th century, in the 19th century? What Israel is doing with the tool called the nation state. The nation state is already in crisis globally. I understand that, but isn't it excusing South African blacks too much? Isn't it excusing the ruling political elite too much to say that they don't have economic power? The challenge is to say, in what form do you economically use political power? It's not somewhere that power. The idea of constantly excusing them as not having economic power, I think that renders them as this helpless, powerless, which is a lie. The state is important. I think it still is today to be able to reorganize Alexander, to reorganize public infrastructure, to reorganize schools, and so on and so forth. What has happened in South Africa is not very different to the rest of the continent. These were the quintessential colonial potentates whose only ever existence as a class was not in the interest of some bourgeois project to themselves. They were always in service of Europe or Euro-American bourgeois interests. And that's why I'm saying, what is this panic all the time when the white people say, we're leaving. And then all of you, no, we are not trying to drive you to the sea. That's a wrong premise for a conversation. Anyone who is scared of equality in South Africa is welcome to go. We're busy with equality here. Professor, I think the PayPal mafia and their sort of capture of the federal government in the United States, we must ask, of course, there are those questions of the algorithms and the applications and the capture of the payment systems and the flow of money, particularly of the federal government and the federal bank and so on and so forth, that they are going to control those mechanisms. But I think these people, I suspect, and we have to have an open conversation. Americans, South Africans in America, African Americans, this PayPal mafia is about 4 South African white men who are in the United States, who went there in their teens or so. They're at the helm of a tech giant. And it seems to me they've just managed to successfully not only have, Donald Trump, the bourgeoisie is the only class in history, ruling class in history, that relegated political power to political elites. But within imperialism, Cecil John Rhodes and all of them, within imperialism, they could see the limits of the nation state, and they were able to invent forms of administrative control, political administrative control in service of expansion for expansion's sake. But here they are not only like, you know, like they've captured Donald Trump. They are with him in government. They're presiding over department. But I think they've got some unresolved grudge that they have with their native country. I think they are possibly people who have a bone or a score to settle with the fact that white people lost the political power in South Africa. I think they are on some project, and I know that this might be a huge jump, but I wouldn't think so. I think anybody who would wake up, who was part of the 1940s peace in the world after the World War II, would be shocked to find Israel doing what it's doing to Gaza. And here is the possibility. We are very disposable to the imperialist forces. If the PayPal mafia could truly settle that grudge, they are not satisfied with the fact that there is a black government in South Africa. If they could truly have the means to settle that grudge, we might become a Gaza. And nobody would care. The Chinese won't give us arms. They didn't give Palestinians arms. The Russians won't send some army. They didn't do that to Palestine. Nobody gave Palestinians physical military defense. We were just all praying for them whilst they were being massacred. Now, if they could do that to Palestinians, the ridiculousness of that particular extermination event, that turning of Gaza into an inhabitable space, what makes you think is not possible here? Because I think that is my suspicion with this PayPal mafia. Check their attitude to Palestine, check their attitude to South Africa, to Africa. We are disposable. We are a very disposable people. Incidentally, Prof, the optic cables are coexisting with the Atlantic graves of the slaves. The very facilitation of digital connectivity in the world, because majority of them actually originate from that part of the world. Coincidentally, there's something of a powerful imagery to think about there. That those optic cables are going, you know, they are possibly going through those graves of Africans that were thrown into the Atlantic as dead bodies in the broader event of the transatlantic slavery. That should tell us our place in this digital future. That's my proposition. I know it's a big provocation, but that's what I think.
Okay. I mean, listening to Mbuyiseni, what is clear is that we cannot really have any illusion about the world that is emerging. The world that is emerging will be ever more brutal than the one we saw. Or in any case, the kind of world we lived in for the last, I would say, 50, 60 years, the world which emerged in the aftermath of the Second World War. Because very clearly, what we used to call the liberal international order, which survived the collapse of communism and lasted for a number of other decades, that liberal international order is now crumbling. And nothing seems to suggest that it will stabilize somewhat and that we will return to the modus operandi which we were used to, with some kind of multilateralism, softening, if you want, the raw, naked power of, in particular, the United States of America or the West in general. So if you want, my feeling is that we are now truly released, not in the open, we are released in the wild, to the point where a number of analysts are now making a comparison between the world which we saw during the 19th century and the one that is opening up in front of our own eyes. So of course, I mean, there are always historical, how should I call them? History never really repeats itself. It never. So we won't go back to the 19th century. We are entering an entirely new epoch, the name of which we do not have right now. But what we know is that this new epoch will not be kind to the weak. It won't be kind to the weak, and it will be premised, I said it early on two things: hostility vis-à-vis reason, that reason has become too cumbersome and we have to get rid of it, and it will be hostile to equality, because for the new religion of entrepreneurship and so-called innovation, too much equality impedes the success of creative people. That's the belief. So it will be a world very hostile to those two things. Reason, we don't want to deal with that, and equality, which of course raises all kinds of questions in relation not only to the future of the nation state, but also the future of the world at large. The future of Africa too. Because in this new world which is emerging, somewhat nation states are, how should I put this gently? It's a form, the nation state form is dépassé. It is objectively dépassé. Which doesn't mean that we shouldn't be investing in some form of being together, in some form of, if you want, being in common, as opposed to apartheid. Because that's what the opposite of apartheid, of apartness, is being in common. So the question we have to ask is whether or not, where will we go looking for the resources to rekindle a project of being in common, which is premised on equality and which is premised on reason. Because if we let go of that, what is the alternative? The alternative is, I have to say, what we see between Israel and Palestine. That's the alternative. And the alternative is, of course, the planetarization of the Palestinian question, if you want, of the Gaza condition. That is what the alternative is. So it seems to me that somewhere, somewhat, we have to harness our intellectual power and the best of our traditions, because we are a very old continent. We are the oldest continent. Our experience of worldliness, of being human in the world, is far older than that of any other community. We have to harness all of that. We have to rediscover that and translate it into a new form of the political, new forms of democracy which are far beyond, let's say, liberal democracy, which is hollowed out, as we know, which has been captured. But we have to find some way, somewhere, of rekindling the forces of life on this earth, which itself is, as we speak, exposed to very, very serious, deep mutations. So that's the way in which I would, let's say, not respond to Mbuyiseni, but think with him and think with those who have asked questions here. Then Victoria raised the very serious matter of, she called it the coloniality of our borders. We all know what's going on here. We can't fool ourselves. The question of borders is not a happy question in South Africa, for all kinds of reasons, some of which are absolutely understandable. So we have to take that into consideration. We cannot stand up and start saying South Africa has to carry the misery of the entire continent, or for that matter, of the world at large. It would not make any sense. It wouldn't be fair. It wouldn't mean anything. If indeed the starting point is what I have been pushing this evening, the question of habitability, that people can live happy where they happen to be. In a context in which we mentioned the Congo, we could have mentioned Nigeria, Sudan, of course, completely falling apart, Libya, where people are forced today to run away from the places where they can exercise their existence. So how do we stop that and turn our continent into a habitable continent for all? And I really believe that younger generations have to take that as a very important part of their mission. This means turning our continent into a vast space of circulation, which it was always. Now you'll ask me, what is circulation? Of course, it has to be managed. But the idea that no African should be a foreigner in the continent, we have to hold on to that. Because, you know what? There's no other part of the world where an African arrives and is welcomed. So we have to go back to those deep, radical sources, out of which it becomes possible to articulate a different proposition, not only for us, but for the world at large, in this planetary age. Because a huge thing that is missing nowadays is empty over there. They have reached the end. That's why nihilism rules. They have no proposition left except for themselves, except for those who are rich, the wealthier. So the space is wide open to harness those deep resources and articulate something which speaks beyond ourselves and take responsibility for the world, just as at its origins when we were alone. So it seems to me that that is the kind of, you see, insurrection of the mind, insurrection of the spirit, because we have to talk about the spirit, is that kind of insurrectionary attitude that is nowadays, required. And if with Mbuyiseni going to the radio and creating that space where we experiment with these small gestures of insurrection, if it takes that, then we have to all be happy that he left the EFF.
It was not a happy event at all. I'm possibly making my final, Victoria?
Submission.
Final submission?
I think so. Apologies, folks, but we'll continue after
Okay.
and in the spirit.
Yeah, I think this, Nkrumah argued in the beginning that as the independence movement should have abandoned the borders, that there must have been from the beginning a United States of Africa. And this was based on the fact that the drawing of borders at the Scrabble for Africa, that word always escapes me, the Berlin Conference. A lot of those borders are non-viable states. It's like a lot of municipalities in South Africa. Most of those municipalities are not viable municipalities. They will never work. We are now haunted by Nkrumah's dream. The capacity for this continent to be at peaceful development with itself, unfortunately, lies in this painful question of borders. And we've got to do that, not in this irresponsible, it's not an irresponsible debate. But it's a debate we must painfully have. Which of these states are working? And what precisely are you defending? And that this is a painful but necessary conversation as Africans we must have. And indeed, I think that challenge lies at the heart of the opening ways in which imperialism is evolving. If we don't enter that conversation, we will be disposable. We will be disposable. I'm saying that consistently with every sort of industrial explosion in the West, even during the time of good mannerisms, meaning the age that Prof is talking about of multilateralism. We cannot argue that even in that age, African disposability was always a possibility. To dispose of Africans as easily and disposable labor, cheap, easily disposable labor, disposable population. That particular condition is more urgent now to think and resolve with the evolving forms of imperialist domination. And I think that it lies precisely with how we are going to resolve that question of the DRC. Because it is a question of the border. A border that is extremely, possibly, its origins is not the people of that region. Nobody asked them if that border should be there. In which conference did you see it? That there must be a separation between the Basotho of Kwakwa and the Basotho of Lesotho. You were never invited in a democratic self-constituting of that. Your opinion never mattered at the construction of the Swazi border, at the construction of the Botswana border. That for some reason, you all have the same culture, language, everything. And then you put a border and you say, no, we're not citizens of the other side. To go on the other side, there must be rigorous processes of checkpoints. And checkpoints that Europeans are not subjected to. So I'm saying that the continent has to think together. It has to come to these resolutions together at its pace and in constant consultation with each other. And it's important. My final comment is this question of work and digital capitalism, work and the artificial intelligence. Obviously, I remember Elon Musk's answer to that question at one session of Geneva. He was like, maybe we should immediately get ready with the social wage. Most professions will be extinct. I mean, maybe we're not talking 10 years. All of you can remember 2010. There was a World Cup here. We can all remember 2010. That's not 10 years ago. It's 2025 now. So if these people ask you, the development between 5110 Nokia and BlackBerry is not a decade. From BlackBerry, which was a smartphone, to the complete touch screen. From that touch screen to the entire convergence of television, of radio, of emails, of everything into this single device. Now this device talks back. Now this device has an opinion. What should I buy? What should I eat tonight? You can ask this device. It will have a much better answer than your lover.
Be careful, Mabatu is
Mabatu is here, yes. I'm not about to have a... But did you know that there's actually a cultivation of precisely love relationships with gadgets? It's precisely that cultivation. They are not retreating. All that is holy is profaned. You will be able to have sex with them. You will be able to do everything. They hope you might at some point co-create with them.
It's called technosexuality.
Technosexuality. So if we are saying majority of the jobs that we are here at VETS thinking we are getting degrees for, computers will be able to do them without any of us in 20 years. It's a perfectly understandable argument if you understand the evolution of this gadget. The technology is massive. It moves at a radical pace. Of course, there's the question of the extraction of value in the capitalist sense, in the sense of, my wages is what I use to participate in the commodities. So we go create these, because we are workers, we create this bottle, they pay us, we go buy it at the market. So when machines are now producing all products, who will be buying them? With what? If they are producing everything without us, how are we going to live? Will they be producing for us? Will be producing for themselves? If they are producing for us, will we be buying? And if we will be buying, where will we get the money, because we don't have wages? That's where you are all possibly going to become the social grant generation. The whole world, you will have massive population of social grant recipients. White people, social grants. Right in New York. Because that's the sort of capitalist, is this the end of that sort of form of extraction of a profit out of a wages, which then is in a circuit of value? We are, at the opening of a different reorganization of human beings and the means of subsistence, at the center of which is artificial intelligence. And if it's truly artificial, we are at its mercy, whether we're going to drink water, whether there'll be water in the apartment or not, whether the toilet will flush or not, whether it will produce toilets. Because I don't think those machines need toilets. They certainly don't have a waste economy, sanitation. So all these are questions that we must answer urgently. But my point, and I think what we have managed to do to provoke tonight, is to center apartheid, the organizing technology, which is always the relationship of the master race to populations of waste, to populations that can be turned into death without consequences, that can be subjected to suffering without questions. They performed all these genocides, so much so that they were not aware that they were killing human beings. It's a lie. They knew. But that is the relationship which has not broken. Democracy didn't break it. Capitalism didn't break it. It has managed to sustain itself. It has coexisted at the height of the 19th century. It has coexisted and gotten worse, even as the digital technologies were exploding. And Gaza is the example. So, and that is apartheid after South Africa. We can abandon it as a tool of analysis in this opening world of imperialist evolution. Thank you very much, and ndinthanda nonke emakhaya.
Let me just say thank you to everyone in the room, online. My fellow, well, I'm not going to say panelists. I had the opportunity to sit between you and moderate. Thank you, Achille. Thank you, Mbuyiseni. Thank you, Wiser. Thank you, Sizwe. Thank you, everyone who came out. May I offer thank you, Nachiba. May I offer the humble parting provocation that, along with this rich conceptualization of apartheid after South Africa, we have the invocation to continue fostering our spaces of reason and thought and critical engagement as we sit within a kind of university complex knowledge economy that often seeks to instrumentalize us towards artificial intelligence and the use of AI for development. So I will close out there. I think there's still drinks and food outside, and we can continue to be in community and in common with each other. Thank you so much, and good night.